is an amazing tool. If we had known about this, we would have built our platform on this. So we started playing around with it, and what we realized was that a lot of other lawyers who didn't have a lot of technical background also wanted to build on Docassemble. So we set out to build out kind of like a front end for Docassemble, where you can go onto it, similar to Typeform or SurveyMonkey, where you add your questions, put your questions in, add logic without using any code, and then attach your documents. So we built that and launched it in the middle of last year, and since then we've kind of been expanding to anyone who wants to use us. We also, within our platform, provide the Docassemble code below the no-code generator. And so if someone wants to build a basic version of their app on our platform, but then wants to do complex integrations, they can do that within the code as well. And so because Rob's talking about his implementation at the big firm, I thought I would talk about some of the ways that some of our clients who are, I know a lot of people are going to speak about the nonprofit sector, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how small and medium-sized firms are using this. And I think it's a really valuable use case from the access to justice perspective too, because a lot of our clients now who were previously only able to serve people who were able to pay them an hourly rate or meet their flat fees are able to provide more volume-based work for clients who never would have been able to pay their higher fees. So I'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So how many people have heard of Richard Susskind? All right. The guy sort of wrote the Bible on the revolution of the legal profession. And I read his first book, and I think it came out in early 2000, but this quote I thought was apropos for us. And the future has already arrived, it's just not evenly distributed yet. And so I see this sort of as our call to action in order to get this great technology out there, so that people can understand that we can have access to legal services, in the same level of efficiency that makes it accessible for low and middle income people. All right, and so I see this more as a mission than a job. Okay, now just sort of looking at the landscape, innovation is absolutely required. Whether you're in big law, little law, wherever, innovation is required. And we've used Docassemble in order to help produce and push out a product, our risk assessment tool. Law firms are ripe for disruption. They are the most inefficient organizations. Everything is built by the hour. It's clients want something different. All right, and I think that Docassemble allows people to get in for a relatively inexpensive investment. Whether it's your time learning how to write Python or such, to sort of do that proof of concept for your organization. And I constantly get this pressure, more for less. And my secret is Docassemble. Okay, and so if I can automate some workflows, that works. I actually started way back with a product called Janana, which was, have you guys heard of Janana? Yeah. Okay. I think it was subsequently purchased or absorbed into Neota. I haven't actually used Neota, but it was very expensive. Then we moved into Adobe Lifecycle for the next generation of our expert system, and then Orbian Forms and Altoga Style Vision for report generation. And now, this last year, we re-implemented our risk assessment tool in Docassemble. And this is great. And I love Python, okay? And this is, the fact that Docassemble allows you to leverage Python is awesome, okay? Before we ever started using Docassemble, we were using Python. And it's relatively easy to find lawyers that actually know how to program Python. Well, it's possible. What I like about it, it's open source. It's componentized, so you can plug in different components. Object-oriented, no black box, no vendor lock-in. Okay. So you go out, you get a commercial expert system. Way way back in my first expert system days, I was spending $100,000 a quarter just to license the expert shell, right? Like, how can you get started pushing out a product when your incremental cost is like that? It also handles very complicated structures. Like some of the examples I related today, that very, that simple method can be used to apply and, create templates. So we also have an iterative structure. Basically, we ask questions about questions about questions. Okay, so we're talking about assets and risks and safeguards and things like that. This type of iterative structure breaks so many expert systems. And Docassemble is stable despite this. Okay. As long as you don't put smart quotes in, you're in pretty good shape. All right. What's that? The smart quotes are, can be a little tricky. And I can start small and scale up. And now, let me turn it over to you to talk about your front end.
Yeah, so in a similar vein, Rob said how much he loves Python. I was not an engineer at the beginning when I started Documate, and it has been kind of something that has been easy for me to use. And we have done a lot of research on our clients who are lawyers and typically non-engineers, and they find that once they can kind of see how our platform generates the Docassemble code, they can actually learn how to create Docassemble interviews on their own and modify those Docassemble interviews on their own. They start with pretty simple use cases where it's mostly just asking a set of questions that flow into one document. Then they add more documents that are attached. And then what they can do is add multiple layers of complex logic to that interview, some of which can be done on our platform and additionally can also be done in the Docassemble platform. We have clients who have never coded before, who go into the code box and add different features that they want and kind of learn from that process. A lot of times this is being done at late nights and on weekends when lawyers are not doing their day job. So I think the feedback we've gotten from the small and medium-sized law firms who are using our platform is that they really actually love playing around with Docassemble and figuring out the code, because I think a lot of lawyers just like to learn new things, and the way that Docassemble is set up and Python is set up in the logic-based structure is similar to how we learn how to apply rules in the legal space. There's also an infinite amount of complexity that some of these smaller firms can actually implement. So we have heard a lot of smaller clients who use Clio, for example. And Clio now has a document subject generator, but it really serves as more of like a mail merge function. It doesn't do a lot of complex logic. But they can connect that to Docassemble and set up all of their templates that will save them a ton of time. On average, the smaller firms that we talk to save about 80 to 90% of the time they would have spent on those forms if they were to draft them by hand by implementing a Docassemble interview. And then on top of that, there are a lot of accessibility features and additional functionality that you can add to it. So I don't know if I know everyone knows that Docassemble is a document assembly platform, but you can also trigger text notifications within a certain number of days after something is sent to a client. You can add a screen reader and do audio interviews where the person actually can hear the interview as they're going through it. So if there are other disabilities that prevent them from going through the interview, you can implement those features. You can add visuals and videos, and the label tags that Docassemble uses are very friendly with accessibility features on websites as well. So those are some things that are really great about why we think Docassemble is awesome.
So there's when I first started building expert systems, I went and I visited Janana at their headquarters. The guy that ran it was Fred Parnell. So somebody back there actually knows Fred, I suppose. Well, he introduced me to this book called Practical Knowledge Engineering. Great book. I encourage it for anyone that's interested in getting started in building expert systems. And part of the reason is because not every project is for building expert systems. So you want to make sure that you hit some of the roadblocks or understand what the roadblocks are. So lawyers will get really excited about it, but they'll bring you this idea, but the idea may be compatible. Okay? And so part of like realizing when to say no is key to being success. So the quote that I took from the book, he referred to this as the like French knowledge engineering quote or story. A miser was drowning in a river. A passerby on the bank called out to him, "Give me your hand." The drowning miser refused. The passerby, "Take my hand." Finally, the miser reached out to save himself. And the thing is, we can just turn our problem around. There's some way to leverage an expert system in order to meet that client need. All right. So some of the keys to my success in building expert systems is follow the tenets of practical knowledge engineering. All right. It's important not to lose your political initiative by investing in features that you just can't. And I think that this was the biggest, most painful lesson when I was starting out is realizing that just because somebody's a partner in a law firm, it doesn't mean that they actually know. User education is key. So we have deployed our risk assessment tool with a couple of consulting organizations. And my biggest issue is I built this awesome tool, but I have to really, after I build the tool, I have to dumb it down and then do user education to make sure that they actually use the tool. Because in order for my expert system to be successful, people want to use the tool, need to use the tool. And so, you're going to constantly be innovating. And I think that's key. And user education, if you're a really technical person, you may not think about it, but it's important for success, especially in a law firm. My other tip, engage in endless self-promotion. If you're in a large law firm, it's all about self-promotion. Okay? If you don't, it's almost like the story is better than the reality. And so, it's important to constantly be selling. Let's have your elevator speech going in order to sort of build excitement and initiative.
It's like Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And then what we do is we'll price our expert systems at a flat rate. Okay, so we'll say, okay, we'll do a risk assessment for $50,000, but it only costs us like $5,000 to do it. I take that $45,000 and reinvest it in my expert system. So that way I can drive innovation. Okay. One quick thing. So when Jonathan was up here, he was having his report run, and he was a little nervous. So our report for the risk assessment takes about 15 minutes to run. And my blood always runs cold if I've got my client sitting there. And it will sit there, but the thing is, it is stable and it works, all right? But our risk assessment tool is complex. I just show you that there's a lot going on there. We built it out very modular design, building in different components to identify threats, safeguards, assets, whether they're physical or sort of data-oriented technical assets. Very iterative structure, but the key is Docassemble handles it, right? As long as you keep the smart quotes out.
Hey, I dispute that. I think smart quotes work. Put a message on Slack. I'll figure it out.
Well, it may have not worked like way back in October. Mm-hmm. Yes, Jonathan, he constantly innovates, and also you help me a lot. Like I come and I ask you some really questions about getting these iterative structure to work. Yeah, he's a saint. All right.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. Jonathan said that one of his someone commented that he has better support than a lot of like enterprise software. Very true.
And so we're talking about sort of like the aspects of actually deploying it and making sure it's usable. One significant component to this is just having a good system administrator that actually can help keep it stable. Okay, and Mike Johnson, he's the guy that helped me get this thing deployed at AWS, and he's going to talk a little bit about our lessons learned. So, if the thing is, you don't want your expert system crashing, and business clients will become sad.
All right. So, how many of you are using the deploying in the single Docker container model? And how many are deploying in a multi-Docker container model? Okay. How many people have deployed the individual components or the non-Docker model? and was that a single server or multi-server? Single server. Okay. All right. So a little bit about my background that's a little bit unique is that I came up through the sysadmin world. Came through private industry, ended up working in DoD and Veterans Affairs, and then back to the private sector. So, and we focus a lot on security. That's our group is the data privacy and security group. But obviously, working for the DoD, that was they prioritize security over productivity often. So, so some of the challenges come when I try to force a project to fit my mental model of what is secure, right? And first of all, give kudos because a project this size, the documentation and the support, like we said, and the maturity of where it at is phenomenal. And projects of this size do not have this level of documentation, so I very much appreciate that. But so we've run into some challenges when we try to move to a multi-server Docker deployment model. For instance, we also support a lot of startups, and the trend these days is microservices, right? And that's where a Docker container does like one single thing. And with Docassemble, the current Docker model is we've got Supervisor D, which is your one single thing, but then it's kind of managing a bunch of other stuff, right? So it is scalable, but in order to scale, you have some of what's going on in the background. And I'll admit, I'm still learning that because it's complex, and sometimes you don't delve into something until you run into a problem, right? One of the challenges is, for instance, ran into in AWS with the Docker deploy model is RDS. So, I'd like to leverage RDS, their automated snapshots, and I kind of ran into this chicken and egg problem where the database, it's if you're using the local database, it initializes very well, recovers very well, but I was not successful in doing an initial deployment to RDS right from the start. And I think that's something I still want to circle back around on and try to fix that and try to figure out how to do that. But I ended up having to instantiate a local database and then migrate that to an RDS instance. And that requires some familiarity with the initialization process, understanding how the container spins up and each of the components gets initialized according to the config file, right? Another one that we run into is updating. Sometimes when people build interviews that have lots of dependencies, and they pull in and update it breaks, so and that's not really a problem, a fault of Docassemble. It's really the interview pulls in things, and then later on something with that dependency in that project changes, and then that dependency can't be updated, and it kind of like breaks the whole chain of Python updates, right? So another one we ran into early on was the encrypted interviews, which is clearly documented, but something we overlooked. And so in our model, it's often collaborative with the client, and when it's not, it's collaborative with ourselves, right? And so the Docassemble is fantastic for that privacy aspect of encrypting the interviews, keeping things private. However, in our model, we need to do some collaboration. We need to be able to work on the same interviews. And that's something that we initially lost a few interviews because they were encrypted, and we let the client start the interview, and then the client forgot their password, and then the client, and so we lost them, right? And they did take a few iterations before we kind of figured out what, and some help from Jonathan. Probably they did night on Slack, which I'm not sure when you sleep, but thank you. And lastly is the ability to meet enterprise security requirements. And that's where I maybe try to not appear a little bit snobby, but my intent there is that my background, many projects got brought in by someone enthusiastic, right? And when they had to go through the process of vetting them, we ran into lots of problems. Some of them are very simple, things that Jonathan has followed, best standards and has avoided doing some of those things. Some of the common ones we used to see were when things would run as root and they didn't need to run as root. On a hardened Linux instance will often break things. The number one thing that breaks things is it changes the system default Emacs. And very few people know what that means, even developers. But it basically means when you write out files, they don't have the permissions you think they have. And then things break. And so these are constant things that are for any project as they mature and get deployed in environments that are more stringent. One thing I like about the private sector is we do have a little bit more flexibility than for instance, in the military and the government. But some of the things that some organizations require is has the project undergone a static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, should have done a pen test. So those are things like that. But luckily that we haven't been hampered by at this point, but certain organizations do have these requirements that could impede adoption of Docassemble. And so I see those as really, as the project grows, some things that I think that we would like to help with. And if anyone has any questions regarding these deployments, where I can help, I'd be glad to.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about what you did implement because you took off the encryption off the interviews? Like, were there other features that you found useful to add on to take care of those security requirements you're mentioning?
So we are actually we're constant, like Robert said, they're putting the time back into the tool, right? And so we're still working through our roadmap of building a front end that will help us to be more collaborative, right? So Docassemble provides this fantastic framework for us, but it's, we're in a little bit different market, right? And you as well. So we adapt to that. So features when you want to scale out and you want to use multiple Redis servers, multiple workers, things like that. Turning those on or off it is very simple, but sometimes getting the communication to work isn't always seamless, right? So the bigger you get, the more complex it is. And when you're running a single Docker container, great, it always works. But then as the complexity dials up, that's where we see some issues. On your side, I would pose the same question back to you on what sort of features do you guys find that you have to turn off?
I do want to throw in our little secret though, is we disabled the encryption and we really didn't do anything else in addition to just keeping it so people from the internet couldn't access the system, right?
Yeah.
So we adjusted the deployment model because the number of people that log in and use it is very small. Maybe you can whitelist IP addresses and like that. And so that's a relatively simple shortcut. But I want to let you answer on.
And actually, speaking of our clients having taken the code the document generates and having modified the Docassemble code, we actually have clients go down into the interview and limit the email addresses who can access particular interviews in that same vein. But what we do on our end is we actually set up every one of our clients with their own server, and so they're kind of black box in that sense. They have their own.
You get AWS or?
AWS, yeah.
So we deployed with the web application firewall. In the end, we were able to whitelist, which is really more effective. I mean, we trust ourselves, right? So we're not going to attack it. But I can see that in a business model where you need to make it widely available and maybe whitelisting isn't practical, then you got to like kind of be a little bit more paranoid, right? And that's where web application firewall and some of these code testing, dynamic, static, and possibly pen testing are things that would give you peace of mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one other thing I think we can help you guys with is we do help startups go through these security diligence processes. And so we could attempt to take sort of a common standard of the security questions that people would normally expect to be asked. We wanted to deploy this at a hospital or a health system or a financial organization. And so maybe have template responses that you can then use in order to get your client, whether it's internal or external, comfortable with the fact that Docassemble is this great thing. But part of it is we can just wrap around the fluff just to make it look like it passes that standard of care that the security people are trying to push down the organization.
Right.
Let's see. Let's see. Is this your? Okay.
So I think the security question is a really interesting one. So if anyone has questions afterwards about that, we can talk more about that. So transitioning into kind of how some of Rob just talked and Mike just talked about their use case at a larger firm. I want to talk a little bit about how we're kind of introducing this to some smaller firms. So I like to say intake is the gateway drug to document automation. Because a lot of smaller firms, they find that they can turn their intake process into a platform that generates the first documents in their case. And so they get their client and they already have, their estate plan drafted for them or their divorce documents almost ready for them. So that's one way they get in the door, and then they're like, oh, wow, I can use this to generate all the documents that I have on my iManage system or my firm's document system. So that is kind of the first way we sometimes get in the door. And then some of the additional ways that smaller firms are using Docassemble is to provide these interviews as free web tools on their websites. So that's a good way to generate leads because people are coming to your website, going through those interviews for free, getting documents for maybe the simple use cases, and then later on we'll call up that same firm to hire them on a bigger case or to have them actually appear at the hearing for that divorce case, for example. 3 is capturing revenue through volume, through Stripe integrations. We have a few clients who have kind of turned Docassemble. We were talking last night about how many companies are now going to be built on Docassemble. So we have a few clients who have built out basically legal technology companies on Docassemble. Those that I've heard of, there's one called Hello Divorce law platform in California that's expanding into Arizona soon. Another one is Fresh Lease. They just provide lease agreements, and they provide a yearly subscription to mostly tenant and landlord landlord systems that have lots and lots of different buildings and locations that they need these leases for. So that's true, and in that way they're able to increase their volume of who they can serve, which generates more revenue for them, but also, as we were talking about earlier, leads them to be able to charge a lower rate. They can charge a lower flat rate because they don't have to spend much time on the case. And that leads to more of the middle class being able to access legal services. So 4th is branded client portals. And that's what I was saying. So some clients who, they are law firms, but they want to provide a set of forms to their clients. And so, and these are lawyers with no coding experience. We've kind of told them how they can go into the Docassemble code, add those whitelisted email addresses who are in turn their clients, and those people then have access to their interviews. So they can create these portals for all of their different clients, which is a good service to provide. And then fifth is kind of building out a more full scope workflow management. You can set up integrations with your client management system to then go into Docassemble, create the interviews, pass it back over to your client management system. As we were talking about earlier, send text notifications. So Docassemble really has a lot of functionality that some of these individual legal technologies companies that are popping up are doing in separate platforms. And I should have shown you the slide when I was talking about that. All right, so we've done a little bit of user research on some of our clients and how they're using their Docassemble interviews. And as I mentioned earlier, they found that they have cut document preparation time by about 80 to 90%. Error rate reduces down to 0 because as long as you know that your system is set up your interview is set up in the right way and it flows into your documents the right way, as you do that in the future, as long as you're not misspelling your client's name, you have a 0 error rate. You could potentially increase your volume by 10x, that's what some of our clients have done, and boost your revenue. And then the final little piece, sometimes we tell people, you can generate these interviews, provide them to your clients online, and they're like, you know what? All I want is to be able to go home and spend time with my daughter, at 5 p.m. That's what I want to get out of the efficiency that I gained through building these interviews. So that's priceless. And then we did kind of 2 user research studies on 2 of the firms that are using interviews. And
It's your service, so you build both of these.
Mhm.
So you have a handbook.
yeah, so there's 2. These are 2 of our clients who have generated interviews on our platform that are Docassemble interviews. And one of them is a family law firm, and one of them is an employment law firm / online service. And the family law firm in the first few months, I think it was in the first 3 months, was able to increase their volume from 15 divorces to 250. And obviously that came in combination with some marketing and putting that out there in the world. And then the employment law firm actually already had a really good web presence. And so they weren't able to service all the people who were asking them for employee handbooks because they had a bunch of staff who was sitting there modifying templates. And they were able to go from 60 employee handbooks. This was in the span of about 6 months. They went from 60 employee handbooks per month to 300 per month. So as long as you can get the word out there, there's a really huge potential for increasing the volume as well.
All right. So I had some ideas. Docassemble is great, and I'm just thinking about different ways that for example, my firm, we make some serious money off of Docassemble. How can we contribute back to the community? Obviously the one thing that we can help out with is security testing and documentation. And I did mention to Jonathan, I would have loved to set up a sort of a nonprofit that provided money to support projects like this. Because I think that it's such a great tool that you're only one guy, and it must be really hard. It's like a mission for you to sort of keep it up and keep it going and things like that. And so as you go through the process of developing, think of ways that we can help you. All right, and for that also for the community, I think that we want to try to give back and help you guys to get service. Actually, 20 years ago, it was really hard to have a business cost-effective system. But now we're making money doing it. We're making a lot of money doing it. And so you guys can too. All right, and I'm not sure how to, support that, but I want to make sure that we tend to be, our little security group that's inside of a bigger security group of human quality. We're open source fanatics, all right? And we want this product to be the product. And also, I want the platform to be an open platform, okay? Because I don't want another Facebook for legal applications where you have to, sort of go in and give up all your privacy rights and things like that. But you have some way to be able to take these things and make them accessible. Like the one application I would just absolutely love is something that helps people with their health insurance. Health insurance is insanely complicated, okay? And there's all these little rules, and if you don't check the box on all those little rules, they'll charge you $100,000, And so, helping people to understand and control their lives a little bit more, because the system is a little bit designed to take advantage of people who don't have adequate legal training. We've also built some useful Python functions, and I'm thinking you guys probably have too. And so maybe some way that we could start to have a community where we share Python functions and integration with a graph database. Is I want to be able to document the flow of my interviews and why the conclusions that were reached, all right? And so solve the intractability issue. Okay. Any sort of, questions?
A question about the intake process. I work for a bar association, and our members are very hesitant to give away anything for free. Most of our active members are in the small space. Is there evidence to show that these giveaway documents at the intake process generate revenue? I know Cooley has I think Wilson too has a similar model.
Yeah, so a lot of the clients that we have who are using it as an intake process are actually having those documents not be displayed at the end to the client, but rather be emailed to the lawyer, so that the lawyer can then take a look and then pass it on to the client. So in that case, obviously, it's just cutting down on their time. I don't know specifics on how much revenue people have generated from just a free product on their website, but I think if it's marketed well enough, like I've heard of Cooley Go, for example. I think Cooley's obviously not built on Docassemble, but a lot of startups know what Cooley Go is, and they go there and fill out their employment agreement on there, and then later on might hire them for a venture capital raise. So I'm not sure of the specific metrics on the free platforms, but
I do recommend not sending the output directly, because the first observation that when we demo the product or new version is like, why are you charging me $50,000 if they just wrote that in 15 minutes, right? So it's so you're gonna as you're developing your business model, you may not want to send the product directly to the client so that you can sort of keep it a little more mysterious.
So actually on that same point, I think when we first were generating our interviews, we didn't have the option to have it emailed back to the lawyer. We would just have the document generated at the very end. And then I had a sales call with a potential client, and this lawyer yelled at me saying exactly that, saying, I don't want my clients to see the documents at the end of the interview. They're gonna think I don't add any value. So we did implement that feature so that they can email it back to themselves. And obviously you can also catch errors that the client may have made. Sometimes clients put in incompatible answers. They say they're married and with children, and then they say they don't have, and in a different part of the interview, they say something that's incompatible with that. So there is actually an error proofing, a client error proofing feature for that.
One more question. So the one thing that I noticed is we build out expert systems. It enables people not to actually review the work product, and I have to push back against that, because I do actually want people to read the stuff that we're sending out the door, just because it actually comes out pretty good. We're giving people some very important advice, and so I actually do think the lawyer has to take a look at it before it goes out to court. You got a question?
Do you have any recommendations, like what we're finding out as we dive into this, standardizing on some of the data objects and user interfaces and sort of just the UI, you know, how you interact with the client instead of just kicking them out saying, sorry, they need an explanation, right? So do you have any tools or best practices in how you standardize across the organization or across the suite of tools that you're pushing out under Docassemble?
So we haven't deployed products to outside of our practice area. So we haven't really had to sort of solve that problem yet. I do know that the firm hired some graphic artists to come in and sort of come up with like a theme that they want to wrap around. And I think, you know, from the Docassemble perspective, whatever sort of theme that you have is relatively easy. Okay. So you can have a look and feel of whatever law firm or organization, like, without having too much work. I think I asked Jonathan about this a while ago, maybe in the documentation, customization. That answer your question?
No, not yet, but that's okay. It's, I find like, you know, it's, when you interact with the public, other members, there's certain things. Here's what's really pissing me off. Non-lawyers are dictating what the user experience is. Well, let me rephrase that. The public is developing an ongoing expectation of how they want to interact with online systems and tools. And so we are playing catch up. And then we think we got something great, and then God damn it, the Slack comes out with something more slick, and then everybody else has no expectation. And so that it's not just what the user interface looks like, but it's also the way the information interacts with the user. And so you know, we're trying to figure out what might be the right standards and protocols so that we can do this as a small organization cost effectively and keep up with the VC-backed organizations. But as a law firm, right, we can't VC back. We got to figure out how to be smarter than everybody else. That's kind of where I'm.
What law firm is it?
Law for small businesses, we're a small group. But we're trying to compete with legals and rocket lawyer and stuff like that. And, you know, they're spending millions on their stuff, and so we're constantly trying to catch up. And people come to us saying, why should I hire you over LegalZoom? Because LegalZoom asks what I want to name the company, for example. You know, so we're always playing catch up. And so I'm trying to figure out how to be smarter, you know, to keep effectively when everybody's changing stuff so quick. Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but what if you just had that information that you're collecting from the client just go directly to you?
Because I'm one person and we have hundreds of new signups in a week, for example. So we gotta get smarter and more.
That's a lot of content.
Yeah. LegalZoom has a lot more than that, right?
Yeah.
And so in order to be able to be competitive with them, we gotta figure out how to pay without the VC funding. Unless we just decide to throw our licensing on the village.
I was thinking that it may be possible to get some grants or you know, helping to sort of fill in some of these areas. Because I do think that there are some organizations out there that do actually care about accessibility and make usability speed. So, not getting venture capital, the grant. So,
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm with the Legal Services Corporation, and legal aid organizations have been working on this for years now, and you know, like Stanford Design Lab, and they're doing all that, kind of approaching it from that end user, low income, most accessible, what are best practices. So there's kind of a lot of resources available, partnerships, maybe with these have been groups that have been, that's their bread and butter.
I'll talk about that like touch on a very small amount in my session later too. So that's something that we've been thinking about. There's some work that started inside in Boston to come up with some standards for like objects, names, and I think that applies to how you phrase questions. And I know that Matt is really interested as well. So love to talk about that.
I conceptually on the freemium model